So we're going to use the mic. Some people can yell loud enough for even the folks up there to hear, but not so much me. So because the acoustics are bad in here, I'm going to ask you to kind of hold the hubbub down to its own roll so that everybody can hear it. Okay? So, for those of you who don't know me, which is a boatload of you, my name is Dan Hubis. We do Liberty Rocks once a month. We teach on foundational principles, founding documents, the history of our country, current events that are hot, especially local. We've used this forum for recalling 2 of our 3 county commissioners who were successful. It's hard to hear? It's too loud? Is that better? Yeah. Okay, good. Well, that's what you keep telling me. All right, so if you can't hear me, do a thumbs up sign. All right, so a lot of people ask why I wear the skirt. At least you're not asking me what's underneath. I wear the kilt for a couple of reasons. One is because I have the legs for it. This tartan is my clan tartan. My mom was born in Scotland. And more importantly, the kilt is a symbol of freedom. And we are all about freedom. All about liberty. So tonight we're going to talk, about the recall that is about to start. Tom's going to talk about more than just Polis. We have our work cut out for us if we are going to save our state. We don't have much time left before it's irreversible. When we worked on the Morse recall, it was because of so many infringements on our rights. This last Congress was much worse. And even if we win, none of those laws get repealed. None of them go back. Who here has a 30-round magazine for their AR? Can you just buy them? Or do you have to buy kits? That's just immoral. So next month, we're going to talk about the history of slavery in America. Yes. We have the entire lunatic left presidential clown car that is talking about reparations. So it's something that we should know about. Who did what, how it worked, that kind of stuff. We're going to kick off tonight's meeting with an ongoing series that we started last month. And it's really, can one person make a difference? So, actually, before we do that, let's introduce some people. Just because there's a ton of people who many of you don't know. I assume everybody knows General Hollingsworth. Where are you, General? Oh, right up front here. General brought one of his friends, Rick Scott, who's a part-time resident in Tanglewood. Bill Scott, sorry. Bill Scott. For those of you who don't know, what we really like about Tanglewood is that in the event of a fire, there's no way out. So, there's a lot of folks here from Custer County. This is our home county. We all know each other. Rick, come here. So Rick Castor is the vice chair of the Republican Party in Kansas City. Really appreciate it. You can tell there are some people who don't know him.
Yeah.
No.
Thanks, Dave.
Oh, yeah, you just.
I just want to take time to introduce some of the people here from Fremont County that actually try to help Custer County if they need it. They call on us. We're not going to infringe on anything. Our secretary of Fremont County, Ron Hanks. Local board, Republican Women's President, Timmy Pearson. Joe, who's second vice president. Back in the back is Royal Gorge Tea Party members, John Clemens, and Chris Pratt, Georgia Smith. And last but not least is HD 60 chair, which covers both our counties, Richard Hollenbaugh.
So it looks like around half the folks here are from out of town. So that's a good thing. Not just our speakers, but some of the audience. So, we're going to go back to, thank you, can one person make a difference? So my lovely and talented wife, Jess.
If I need that. Do I need it? No. Don't need that. Do I need it? No. So we started this series last month. Does anybody remember who we talked about?
Yeah, socialism and communism.
Lincoln. Lincoln and
John Quincy Adams.
John Quincy Adams. A few people remember that story. It was a great story. And basically, we're going to do a series until I run out of people. Might be next month, I don't know. On can one man make a difference? So let me start with a little bit of history. How many of you have heard of the Stamp Act? Good, good. So basically, the whole purpose of the Stamp Act, and there were several of them, they kept renewing it. And for a long time they didn't even enforce it, but then they'd decide to enforce it and then they wouldn't. And so the basic premise of the Stamp Act was that you needed to buy your goods from Great Britain. And if you were buying your goods under the table, and there was a ton of that going on, then Great Britain could actually prosecute you. So the idea of the Stamp Act was if you bought them through the right sources, they would have a stamp on them. Well, then we had to figure out how are we going to know whether you're using smuggled goods or not. And so they came up with writs of assistance. Do we know what writs of assistance were? Writs of assistance were general warrants that almost anybody could get, and they didn't say where they needed to search, what they were searching for, whose house they were going to go into, when, where, nothing. It was, hello, I'm Jackie, I'd like to see what your tea says. And I'm going to come into your house and I'm going to make sure you're not buying that Dutch tea. We can't have that. Those are called writs of assistance. Well, the Adjutant General's name at the time, this was 1761, by the way, long before 1776, right? The Adjutant General's name was James Otis Jr. And he was the guy that was supposed to enforce these writs of assistance. But he kind of had a problem with the whole idea of this whole you know, searches, basically warrantless searches. So he stepped down from his position. He sent in his resignation. Well, the king didn't get it, his resignation. And so they charged him with dereliction of duty, which I haven't been able to nail down the sources yet, but I believe was treason. Dereliction of duty. So there he is, you know, kind of between a rock and a hard place. And some guys came to him and asked him, he was a lawyer, if he would defend them in a writ case. So there he was. He went into this court, both at the demand of the king, you come and tell me why we shouldn't hang you for treason. And he was also there to defend these businessmen who did, you know, who were having trouble with these writs and systems. So this was February 1761. He goes into court and he speaks for 5 straight hours. And one of the things he said, and forgive my notes, but I don't have all of this memorized, he says, it appears to me the worst instrument, these writs, the worst instrument of arbitrary power, the most destructive of English liberty, and the fundamental principles of law that ever was found in an English law book. Remember, they're still all English citizens, right? So he speaks for 5 hours. And at the end of his time, the court rules, I'm going to use that with quotes, because courts don't rule, kings do. Thank you very much. So when they come tomorrow and they say, the Supreme Court ruled, you can stand up and go, courts don't rule, kings do. Okay? All right, so that was all right, so the court ruled that it wasn't going to give them a decision. We'll get back to you on this. They never did. And the stand back kept on, and the writs of assistance kept on. And so, can one man make a difference? It wouldn't seem so at this moment, would it, for James Otis? Now, he was not arrested for treason. You know, but he kind of had a non-decision after all that preaching. Except that, in that packed courthouse were several people. One of which said, let's get his quote right, this man years later recalled how Otis's argument had electrified the audience. Every man of an immense crowd appeared to me to go away as I did, ready to take arms against writs of assistance. Then and there was the first scene of the first act of opposition to the arbitrary claims of Great Britain. Then and there, the child of independence was born. And that man speaking to you that was sitting in that audience that day was John Adams. Beside him sat his cousin Samuel. Can one man make a difference? They sure can. I'd like to share with you something that came across my Facebook the other day. Police raid a home hours before obtaining a search warrant. 3 judges just ruled that the evidence is admissible. Whoa. Right here.
What state?
Writs of assistance. Well, it was the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 7th Circuit. Let's see. bunch of them were working together on a drug rape. And they intended to get a warrant. They just didn't get around to it. So this is what they said. All agree, all three judges agree. The DEA entry team entered Huskinson's house unlawfully. We do not condone this illegal behavior by law enforcement. The better practice is to obtain a warrant before entering a home.
You think?
Ordinarily, the evidence found here would be excluded. But because the government had so much other evidence of probable cause and had already planned to apply for a warrant before the illegal entry, the evidence is admissible. Though the government should not profit from its bad behavior, neither should it be placed in a worse position than it would otherwise have occupied. Let's just see what this says about it.
Ask what things say.
What does the warrant have to say? What does this thing say a warrant has to be?
Shannon can't answer.
Shannon can't answer. Wow, don't all answer at once. Amendment 4. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches of seniors shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by an oath of affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched, the person or things to be seized. Now, I did not read in here the right of the lawkeeper. This guy was a bad dude. So many people will go, yeah, he was a bad dude. Constitution didn't say that. It says the right of the people to be secure. Just saying.
As we continue our escalation into socialism, we're going to see more and more and more bad decisions from the courts. Like the Supreme Court just recently opined that you can be tried more than once for the same offense. The state can charge you and try you. The feds can charge you and try you for the same offense. Double jeopardy is now out the window as well. So, before I bring Tom, I want to do some housekeeping. So, in case you haven't figured it out, you're on your own for food and drinks. But the wait staff here will take your order, and we're really good about it. And because we're so many, please don't stiff them and tip well. Tom is going to ask you to donate tonight for this extremely worthy cause. Because we live under communist rules for some parts of our life, if you donate $20 or more, you have to give your entire life history. Maybe not that much, but you have to give your name, your address, your occupation. Just way too much. So if you would like to donate cash, you have a bowl up here. It's got a bunch of pennies in it. If you put in a $20 bill, take a penny out, keep Tom legal. If you're going to donate more than $20, then there's a form for it, no big deal. Okay? I know that's a really silly law, but the government wants to know who you support and why. You know, because they have an interest in everything about it. All right, so we have an uphill battle. And Tom's going to cover it all. How many of you know the name Tom Good? Seriously? Okay. How many of you know that there's a recall planned to start in a few days? That's better. Okay. Tom Good was gracious enough to drive all the way from Denver. I assume Denver.
Yeah.
Yeah, poor guy. It's just kind of suck to live in the city.
It does.
It does. So I would really appreciate it if you guys would give him a rousing hand.
Hey guys, how are you? Good. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to try to talk without the mic. Nobody's ever told me I was too quiet my whole life, and I'm not going to be any kind of exception. I spend a lot of time thinking about how the best way to handle these meetings are, because there's a lot of people who show up who care what I have to say. And it's okay that only like 5 people raise their hands when they heard my name. After this is over, forget my name. I hate being in the public spotlight. I never want to do it again. This is purely by accident. I stepped up and I was the right guy at the right place. And I hoped that somebody was going to come and be the spokesperson, and that person never showed up. So here I am. I love doing it, but I also don't love like the constant prying into my personal life. I value privacy probably just more than anybody else. So when I think about these meetings, I think you need to be a really inspirational speaker, right? You should get people so fired up. And then I think, okay, well, where are we right now? Well, we're at halftime of the football game, and we are getting our butts kicked so badly by the liberals right now in Colorado. So then is it my job to show up and just give this rousing speech and everybody flips chairs and busts out the door, and then once we got there we just romp them? I've tried that, I'm not very good at it. I learned that my brain works in more of a logical way, so I'm more of a numbers-driven person, I'm more of a strategist. But my goal is to connect everybody with the right roles and that they can be that person if need be. Some of you may be, some of you are great speakers, I'm sure, probably better than I am. So I'm going to apologize in advance if this gets at any point a little boring or you're not like ready to barge out the door in a positive way, because it's just not really how I handle it. There will be a time and a place for riling up, probably 2.5 weeks. We want to direct that energy toward getting the decision out. Tonight, not so much. Tonight I want to lay out kind of our plan, backing up a little bit to say what the strategy is, but why are we here? In a lot of ways, I think I have a huge advantage to show up to a meeting like this because I don't have to spend the first 15 or 20 minutes talking about why should we recall Polis. I think for the most part, everybody gets it by now. If you don't, I mean, sit quietly and politely through the meeting. Let's talk in the alleyway out back. I have some words for you out there. After this is over, I'd be more than happy to. So I can skip through that a little bit. I think we're mostly on the grounds that, it doesn't matter what your voting history is in terms of, do you vote to protect our Second Amendment? Do you vote to defend the unborn? Do you vote for lower taxes? Do you vote for Christian values? The list goes on. He's assaulted just about every single person in every category in some way or another. And not even that, he just has a long history of being kind of a crony politician. I was thinking to myself when she was speaking that, dereliction of duty was an act of treason before the Constitution came out. Fun fact about Jared Polis is when he was a U.S. congressman representing essentially Boulder, he had a worse voting record in terms of actually showing up and casting his vote than Louise Slaughter in New York did. I don't expect anybody to know who Louise Slaughter in New York is, but the funny thing about Louise Slaughter and her voting record is she died about a quarter of the way into her term. So she couldn't show up to vote because she was no longer living. And she still cast more votes on important bills than Jared Polis did. So, something important to remember, it doesn't, it just paints a background of what his history's been. He's essentially paid for every race himself, out of his family's fund and his own money. That said, usually I think I'm going to let Greg come after me, so I really want to try not to steal too much of his thunder. Greg Lopez is in the audience tonight, I think. What Greg can attest to probably better than I can is that as a candidate, which I never have been and I hope I never am, you have to show up and you have to connect with people from all different parts of the state and you have to get them to like you. Most politicians, whether they're ultra-liberal or ultra-conservative or someone in the middle, they're kind of fascinating. You like them. You like what they say. Maybe or maybe not what they stand for, but there's something that makes you curious about them and they're likable people. So a lot of times, like I worked in DC for a couple of years, I hated that too. But you'd meet somebody that just had the worst voting record ever. And you're like, I don't know why, but I just can't hate them as a person, even though they vote terribly. Jared Polis is the exact opposite of that. If you've ever met him, he's just a turn off of a person. You know, you could love his policies, which I hope you don't, or you could hate him. Either way, when you meet him, you're going to leave with like a bad taste in your mouth. That's kind of the kind of person he is. But enough about the personality. Let's talk about the recall. So there is law written as to how a recall works. Not every state in the country has this. So as Coloradans, we kind of have a little bit of an advantage. I like to think about a recall in some regards as like a lemon law. You don't really have to agree or disagree with their policies, although you should disagree with them. The idea behind this isn't that Jared Polis is voting for all these bills, really. The idea is that he didn't say he was going to do that when he ran for office. He ran a very different campaign in 2018 than what he's voting for right now. So somebody could make the claim, well, you knew what he was when you voted for him or when you didn't. Well, no, we didn't. I mean, I think I did. I spent a lot of time researching him and disliking him, but not everybody would. I mean, his whole campaign was actually designed to hide himself behind this alternative agenda that he spoke on, and then he went a different direction. So with this lemon law called a recall, we were fooled by the slick car salesman, but we have a chance to take the car back to the dealership and drop the keys off. So Chapter 15 of the Colorado Elections Policy Manual discusses it. It says every elected officer in the state or local level in Colorado is subject to recall from office. Each one has a little bit different set of rules, but as governor, Jared Polis is a statewide elected official, obviously. So at the state and county levels, he has to serve for 6 months before he can be recalled. That's a huge thorn in our side, because I would have loved to have been out here January 9th, the day after he was sworn in, and starting to round people up. We've essentially had to sit on our hands in terms of the recall and just slowly and quietly organize every single county around the state to get people ready. Meanwhile, essentially watching from the sidelines as he just rams bills through that we've already voted against, like Proposition 112 was a major oil and gas setback. They passed that through under the guise of Section 181. They struck down the forced vaccination bill in the state house this year, and then Polis signed it by executive order. So he's certainly not listening to any of that. And at the time, there was, even if you did show up to the Capitol, even if you did testify against the bills, he's not listening. So he's just going to pass what he thinks is best for you, and we all know that's the worst way. That's ruling. That's what a king does. That's not what an elected official does. So Polis was sworn in January 8th. That means we have until July 8th until the Secretary of State can look at the language of the petition and release it. That's only 2.5 weeks away. The number of signatures that we have to collect is huge. It's 25% of how many people cast their vote in that entire election for governor. So there was multiple candidates across the board. That number added up to 2,525,062 votes. Divide that by 4, or 25%. We have to collect 631,265.5 valid signatures this year in order to make the recall selections. Make the recall pass through. Once those petitions are collected, once you have the valid number of signatures you need, then there's a ballot question. That ballot question is going to be 2 different questions. The question 1, should Governor Jared Polis be recalled? Yes or no? You can answer that however you like and then move on to the second question. I'll tell you how you should answer it. You should answer it yes and put a big exclamation point behind it. The second question, though, is where this recall gets a little bit tricky, and it's something we don't really have an answer for you just yet today. The second question is, who should be his replacement? Because it's not that the lieutenant governor steps up. The only way the lieutenant governor steps up is if Polis decides to resign in 5 days within that signature being valid. I can guarantee you, and I will bet anyone in this room any amount of money, he will not resign. Jared Polis has way higher expectations and way more goals in life than just being the governor of Colorado. He wants to be president, and he ultimately wants to be emperor of the world. So he will not resign. Especially, he will not resign 6 months after being elected the first openly gay governor of the United States. He will not resign after spending $23 million of his own money, per a lot of reports, to buy his own way into the governor's mansion. He will not resign after, almost 15 years of working to reconstruct the political structure of Colorado along Pat Stryker, Ruth Bridges, and Tim Gill. What's called the blueprint. If you haven't read it, please do. Meet with me after the meeting. I'll give you a link to it. He won't. So we can squash that rumor immediately. It's just simply impossible that would ever happen. But let's talk numbers. This is where I'm going to bore you for a second. But I think if you get what is in red you're going to understand why this is so doable. Because 631,266 signatures is huge. But let's talk about who voted. In 2018, 1.4 million, 1.35 million people voted for Governor Jared Polis to be the governor of our state. About 1.1, just under a million voted for Walker Stapleton, another 25,000, and another 70,000 for alternative candidates. 1.386 million people in Colorado didn't vote, who were registered to vote, didn't cast a vote. So what that means is that 34.4% of all eligible voters in Colorado elected this governor. 34.4. That's a failing grade on any scale that you look at. So is 65.5, by the way. That also means that 65.5% of registered voters in Colorado did not vote for Jared Polis to be governor. So when you start crunching the numbers and you get really boring about it, we have 2.5 million people in the state who either voted for Stapleton, one of the other two candidates, or didn't vote at all. We only need 631,000 signatures. So what is that? Just under a quarter of all of those people that are kind of in our realm of possibility to sign this petition, we need a signature from. Way more doable than what the news media seem to want you to think it is, especially when we put on a meeting right here, and I don't even know how many people are in the room, but it's probably close to 80, if I had to guess. Did someone count? 96? Call your friends, we need 4 more. Brag about this later. So, a little bit of recap, that the very soon as we can distribute this petition is until July 8th. That means we can't collect any signatures in advance. The reason being is that the Secretary of State has to approve that exact language word for word and then release it. We have to remember that we don't necessarily have a friend in the Secretary of State's office right now. So they might change one word just to make us have to revert our plans just a little bit the day that hits the printer. So what we've done is all of our print shops already have deposits paid on them. There's 5 different ones around the state. They have the paper they need, they have the staples, the binding, the legal sized paper, and volunteer stickers ready to print. They just don't have the language, and they won't have that language until the Secretary of State approves it. As soon as it does, whether it's 1 o'clock in the morning or noon, they're going to hit the press right then, because we have a 60-day sprint after that petition is approved to gather all those signatures, rebundle them, and then turn them back into the Secretary of State's office. Pretty short period of time, honestly. Once those signatures are gathered, he has 5 days to resign. We already discussed that. Not going to happen. After that 5 days, which of course, if you think about politics, he's going to wait all 5 days. He's going to keep people guessing, and he's going to try to delay this process as long as he can. After 5 days, he's going to come out and say, hey, I'm not going to resign. I'm going to fight this, and I'm going to stand for the recall election, and I'm going to win. So then he's going to say, but by the way, I want to protest that these signatures are not valid. So the Secretary of State will have already checked them here. Through the score system, we're going to give them, I hope, about 900,000, 850,000 signatures. That way, that any are invalid or they'll get kicked out. We're still going to have enough. So she'll say, all right, they're valid. He says, I'm not resigning. I protest. It means they have to go back through the system again. And only the ones that passed the first time, and they're going to somehow try to whittle those numbers down to less than the 632,000 total. If they can, which I think that if we just blow them away with numbers, we don't necessarily have to worry about that. But that's a 15-day process. So there's another 15 days that this kind of starts to drag on a little bit longer. We can continue to gear up and organize. But then after that, after the second time when we really show them that, hey, we have enough signatures and they're valid, then you have the Secretary of State who's going to call for a holding a date of an election. They don't have any options here. There are certain things that the Secretary of State cannot make up her mind on. The law is the law, and the Secretary of State State's office has to follow it no matter what. So they have to set an election date that is no less than 30 days after, no more than 60. So somewhere in a 30-day window. And that election date is actually the starting date of a 22-day ballot process. As of right now, it looks like it would probably be a mail-in ballot, as we're all familiar with in Colorado. But I understand that in my conversations with the state GOP, there's a way to make that an in-person ballot, which, statistically speaking, benefits conservatives and Republicans tremendously. The ballot harvesting that I think we all know exists in Colorado would be null and void. All these ballots that hit college campuses and then leave in the back of a truck and they never see a recycling can, and then all of a sudden they show up at a ballot center shortly afterwards. We can eliminate that. You can eliminate illegal votes. You can eliminate a lot of the younger people who just aren't really that in tune with politics. It's so easy to cast a ballot. They will. I don't have a rock solid answer on that, whether that's doable, but it sounds like it is. So that's an option that we have a little bit down the road. And then we have that recall election. As I said, the recall election is going to be, should Jared Polis be recalled? Yes or no? Regardless of whether or not you say yes or no on that ballot, you have the option to answer the second question is who is his replacement. Anyone can be on that ballot that wants to be on that ballot as long as they can get 15,000 signatures within that 22-day window, before that 22-day window, I should say. It means there could be 6 Republicans, there could be 11 Republicans, or there could be 1. Greg Lopez is going to talk about unity, so I'm not going to get into that too deeply. I think he's got a really good idea, and I think he's probably seen it more than anyone else in this room, or at least most of us, in terms of how the GOP isn't necessarily always on the same page as people in rural Colorado. They more or less pick a candidate, and they say, this is our guy, this is the guy who can win. They put him up on the stage, and they say, now are you going to vote for him or not? I believe a lot of you probably say, no, I'm not. Until you give me a better candidate, this guy doesn't get my vote. The Republican Party is not necessarily entitled to your vote. So if you sit out an election, yeah, we lose, but maybe we start to reform the party as a bigger picture. I don't know. Yeah. Full disclosure, I worked in DC for about 4 years before I moved out here. Most of the targets I went after were actually Republicans and not Democrats. The reason being, I chose target states like Mississippi, like Kansas, where if you put a real conservative in the primary race and you fund them properly and they win, they're going to go on to the general election and win every single time. The only time that's ever backfired, and this is not a race that I was part of, was the Judge Roy Moore race, which just turned into a circus on TV in the state of Alabama. You know, they dragged that guy's name through the mud so bad that even though he was the most conservative candidate in the primary, he couldn't win with that much lunacy surrounding it. But you know, I find it very important that the Republican Party wake up. You know, that you start to listen to not just those who live in the I-25 corridor. Hyper hypocritical because I live in the I-25 corridor right now and I can't stand it. But I haven't found a place to live just yet. The drive out here was awesome, so you got me. Who can volunteer? This is kind of, we're going to start to get down on the nuts and bolts of what I want to ask everybody here to do. I want you to make up your own mind. That's what I really want. Do you want to just sign a petition? Show up to a signing event, make sure your address is correct, put your signature down as accurately as you possibly can for your remembering of registering to vote, and go home. And then feel like, hey, I've done my part. That's fine. If that's all you want to do, that's all you can do, please do it. Please make sure you show up and sign a petition at some point in the next 60, 70 days. Do you want to circulate a petition? Do you want to grab one? I think next week, next month at Liberty Rocks, there will be a petition here. I can guarantee you that. Who that petition? What's that? Oh, good. Yes, right. And there'll be one at the Sentinel every single day too. So we have a lot of signing locations. So, but if you want to distribute one, if you have 10 people who live on your street that might need that petition, get those 10 signatures, get it notarized, and send it back. There's a little bit of training involved, but it's really not that hard. There's just a few rules that you have to follow. You can't sign your own petition. It needs to be signed in blue and black ink. The address that someone signs that petition has to be exactly what your address is on your voter registration. We have a way to remedy that, make sure you get it right every single time. I'll talk about it in a second. You have to never take your eyes off your petition for 1 second. It stays in your hand, in your view, and that person signs it in front of you. They can't turn their back and sign it. You have to watch them and witness it. Because you're going to go to a public notary when you're finished with that petition and say, I hereby claim every signature on this petition is valid and the person who signed it is who they say they are. You're putting your name on the line to do that. It's a great opportunity to get involved in politics. Can one person make a difference? Get some signatures. You'll find out. You have to be a U.S. citizen. You have to be a Colorado resident. You don't actually have to be registered to vote here, but I think just for us, I'd like that to be a requirement. I trust that everybody who wants to circulate will be registered to vote anyway. And you have to be at least 18 years old. Who can sign? Colorado residents have to be registered to vote. So I'm going to talk about something that I didn't put a slide on here for.
How long do we have to be registered?
It actually doesn't matter. You can register day of. I would caution against that. So if you know someone right now who's registered or isn't registered, get them to register today, tonight, tomorrow morning, because you could ideally have them register at the time. They could fill out their paperwork, they could sign, but if the Secretary of State's office doesn't process that fast enough for when the petition comes in, that person's going to show up as a null and void because they're not in the system. And who's to say they don't sit on those for a little while just to be a nuisance? Again, we don't have a friend in the Secretary of State's office. And so there are little things that we need to make sure that we clear up early so that we don't run into that. So yeah, anyone you know, call your friends, blast it out on your emails, get them to register. I mean, they should be anyway, to be honest, but you never know.
Tom, how do we, what if we have, like kids that are in the military that are registered voters in Colorado, but they're out of state? Is there any way to get them?
The answer is yes. Unfortunately, and based on my opinion, it's going to be so much effort to get what is kind of probably not a huge number of signatures that it's not worth it. We'll do it. But then what we have to do, we have to mail them a petition packet. It has to travel in a larger carrier, so it's expensive. It has to be signed by them. They have to find a notary on their Air Force base or military outpost, get it signed, and mail it back, all in like a 55-day window. So for the number of signatures, I think, let's go back to the numbers. 2.45 million people are in our universe of signers. I would love them to participate in the political process, but it's going to be a lot of extra work to track down those few signatures when our time could be better spent, in like more urban areas. So I'll do a Q&A at the end too. So you guys, if anything's real pressing, just hang on to it. So I didn't make a slide for this next thing I want to talk about, but this is something that we've been working on for a while. And I'll have like really good screenshots of it tomorrow morning. I've got a meeting at 8 a.m. to do it. But we purchased a really, really high-tech application. And it's just a phone app. You just pull it up on your phone. It pre-downloads the information. So I know, especially here, there's very bad cell phone reception. And that's not going to change in the next 2.5 weeks. So you can connect to your Wi-Fi at home and preload some of the information. And what we'll do is if you sign up to be a petition gatherer, we're going to give you access to this app. And we can draw what's called a geofence. So if you're not going to leave Custer County, then we will only give you the data in your phone for Custer County just to make it easier on you so it doesn't have to load more. But when you look at the signature on a petition, there's 4 factors. Are they a registered voter? What is the exact address that they registered to vote? What does their signature look like? And then, maybe there isn't a 4th, but the 4th I'll say is, can we contact them in the case that their signature is invalid? Because there is a 15-day window in addition to that window that I talked about, where if we were to turn in 700,000 signatures and the Secretary of State kicks out 100,000, so we quickly need another 30,000, they give us a 15-day grace period to remedy your petition and get them back. So some of the ones that can be kicked could be perfectly valid, but your signature looked a little funny and the system kicked it out. So when this app shows up, our objective is to remedy 3 of those 4. There's only one we can't control. One we cannot control by any means is what does your signature look like. But we can control the other ones. So you're going to show up and I'm going to say, Bob, thanks for coming. Let me just punch your information real quick. All right, you're a registered voter. Check 1. Every person who signs our petition, if we use this app, is a registered voter. Plain and simple. We know the left sometimes tries to hijack these things. They show up with a line of people in Denver and they just sign with a fake name and a fake address. And you get all confident because, hey, I got 400 signatures today. I'm doing really well. Well, 280 of them were fake. So we can make that not an issue. The second one is your address. Imagine if you live at 61 West 28th Street. Is West just a big capital W or is it the word W-E-S-T? Believe it or not, it matters. We kind of interchange those back and forth all the time. So when we pull up your voter registration, it's going to say 68 or 20, whatever number I said, I already forgot. It's just the capital W. So I want to make sure that you fill out your petition exactly that way. And it needs to be that way or else it's going to be kicked out. The third one, where am I? Registered, recovered, or didn't I? Are you registered to vote? What is your address? Signature we can't control, and then that's right. And then the 4th one is, if in the case that your signature looks bad, what can we do? So the objective here is when you fill that out, we're going to check you off the list. And some people live in districts, and I'm not going to get too deep into this today, but we're actually doing multiple recalls. So recallpolis.com is kind of the umbrella corporation or umbrella nonprofit to orchestrate the recalls locally too. Because say, for example, that we don't get enough signatures to recall Polis. That means he has a super majority in the state house next year. He has a majority in the Senate, and he himself is a raging liberal governor. So he has another year of free reign minimum before anyone faces election. So at the same time, if we recall Polis and we go after State Senator Kerry Donovan or State Senator Pete Lee or State Senator Brittany Patterson, the very least that we will accomplish is it will kind of build a firewall in the Senate. So we'll take back the Senate. So you only need to flip 2 seats, or sorry, 3 seats total to make it +2 in the Senate. So that's doable. So when you're on that app, all right, Bob, thank you for signing the Polis petition. By the way, you live in Senate District 5. I happen to have this petition with me as well. Please sign it. We're going to check them off the list. So now, in our app, and then it's going to all culminate in a computer, we know that we don't have to bother you for the next 59 days, assuming you sign on day 1, to come and sign the petition. You've already signed both of them. But what I'd like everyone to do is just write their name, their phone number, and their email address down in the instance that if your signature is not valid, we can contact you instantly. We don't have to hunt you back down and say, hey, for some reason your signature was kicked out. It says here your signature was wrong. And the signature sheet actually tells you line by line where their error took place. Also, you're going to sign on a petition packet that has a code on it. There's going to be probably, I would guess, just under 30,000 petition packets circulating around Colorado. Each one of those is going to have a unique tracking code. Each one of those is going to have 40 unique lines on it to sign. So when you fill that out and Bob gives me his signature, then, all right, petition packet 36-4321, line 26. This is the part where everybody's eyes are glazed over because it's really boring stuff, and I get that, and I sympathize with you. But it's also really important, because if you sign and one thing is wrong, and it's likely the Secretary of State will tell us that, we can contact you in that 15-day window and get you to sign again and get you to sign an affidavit. We can then make sure we have enough signatures. So having that contact information, all of that under one app, that's actually relative.